For years, it's been the most talked about, most anticipated public offering in, well, modern history. And it looks like in 2026, it is finally happening, the SpaceX IPO. But here's the thing. If you're thinking about investing, the biggest question isn't if you should buy, it's what are you actually buying? So let's get into it because the answer is way more complex and, honestly, way more interesting than just rockets.
It all got very real on December 10th, 2025. After years of Elon Musk saying a public SpaceX would just get in the way of his mission to Mars, he dropped this simple confirmation on X. Just like that, the rumors were true. The countdown to the biggest tech IPO of the decade was officially on.
And the stakes? Well, they really couldn't be higher. Musk himself has thrown out a potential valuation of up to $1.5 trillion. I mean, that's a number that would instantly make it one of the most valuable companies on the planet. But to even begin to wrap your head around that valuation, you have to look past the fire and smoke of the rocket launches.
Right, because here's the first big surprise. When you buy SpaceX, you might think you're buying a cutting-edge space exploration company, but the financials, they tell a completely different story. You're actually buying an internet company.
This is the absolute core question for any potential investor, right? We all see the amazing Falcon 9 landings and the giant Starship prototypes. But where is the money really coming from? What's the engine that's actually driving this colossal valuation?
Well, the answer is surprisingly clear. If you look at the projections for 2025, a staggering 70% of SpaceX's revenue isn't from launching cool stuff for NASA or other clients. Nope, it's from Starlink, its global satellite internet service. The launch business, as important as it is really just the smaller piece of the pie. So, why is this such a big deal? It all comes down to profit margins. The traditional aerospace business, the Boeings and Lockheed Martins of the world, they run on razor-thin margins, often less than 10%. But an internet service provider, that's a whole different universe. Companies like Comcast can pull in margins anywhere from 38% to even 57%. So for an investor, ending up with an ISP instead of a rocket company, that might just be the best mistake you ever make.
And the scale we're talking about is already huge. With over 8 million customers and growing like crazy, Starlink isn't some startup experiment anymore. This is a global utility in the making. But the story doesn't end with just beaming internet down to homes in the middle of nowhere.
This brings us to the next layer of the SpaceX business model, and it's a plan to put a satellite connection directly into the device that, let's be honest, you're probably holding in your hand right now, your phone.
That's right. The ambition isn't just to replace your home internet. It's to become a direct competitor to giants like AT&T and Verizon by providing mobile service straight from orbit.
The technology behind this is called direct-to-cell, and the goal is to use Starlink satellites to talk directly to the smartphone you already have in your pocket, no special new hardware needed. The whole idea is to completely wipe out mobile dead zones, which still cover something like 90% of the Earth's surface.
And if you want proof of how serious SpaceX is about this, just look at their acquisition of wireless spectrum from EchoStar. Now, you can think of spectrum as the invisible highways that carry mobile data. This wasn't some small purchase. We're talking a $17 billion deal. That's a massive bet on the future of mobile connectivity from space.
So this massive investment gives them the dedicated radio frequencies they need to power a next-generation direct-to-cell service. We're talking about something with 100 times the capacity of earlier systems and totally optimized for 5G. This is the key that could unlock true global mobile coverage. But believe it or not, even that might not be the ultimate endgame here.
Because the third, and most futuristic layer of the SpaceX business, it isn't about connecting people at all. It's about powering the single most energy-hungry technology on, and maybe off, the planet: artificial intelligence. Now, this might sound like straight-up science fiction, but the logic behind it is surprisingly grounded. The crazy, explosive growth of AI is creating a legitimate energy crisis for data centers here on Earth. So SpaceX's most valuable long-term asset might just be its easy access to space itself.
The concept is basically a space-based data center. You put huge clusters of computer processors up in orbit where they can soak up constant, unfiltered sunlight for power. Think of it as a cloud provider, like Amazon Web Services, but literally up in the clouds.
And the logic is actually pretty compelling when you break it down. First, AI's hunger for electricity is doubling every few months, and our power grids on Earth just can't keep up. Second, space offers free, unlimited solar power 24/7.
Third, fully reusable rockets like Starship are on the verge of dropping the cost of launching stuff to orbit by over 99%. And finally, unlike on Earth, there's no real estate to buy in space. You can just keep building. You can scale forever.
Now, it's a pretty new industry today, maybe worth around $500 million. But analysts are projecting that the market for these orbital data centers could explode to $15 billion by 2030. It's a market that SpaceX, with all its launch and satellite know-how, is in a perfect position to basically create and then dominate.
Okay, so let's bring this all back together. We have a launch business, a global ISP, a future mobile provider, and a potential orbital AI computing platform. How on earth do you put a single price tag on all of that?
Well, the private markets have definitely been trying. The company's valuation has just been on a tear, shooting up from $46 billion in 2020 to an internal valuation of around $800 billion by the end of 2025. I mean, that is a growth trajectory unlike almost any company we've ever seen.
But this is the big dilemma for investors right now. Trading on those pre-IPO secondary markets has the company valued somewhere in the range of $420 to $440 billion. And that's a huge number, don't get me wrong, but it's nowhere near the $1.5 trillion target Musk is shooting for at the IPO. Bridging that gap is all about convincing Wall Street of the huge vision we've just walked through, and of course, dealing with any potential turbulence.
The political and regulatory risk is very, very real. This quote here from Senator Edward Markey, who's questioning the close ties between NASA and SpaceX, is just one example. Once it's a public company, SpaceX is going to face a whole new level of scrutiny over its government contracts, its competitive practices, and of course, its very powerful CEO.
Which brings us right back to where we started. When you buy a share of SpaceX, are you buying the world's most dominant launch provider, a high-margin global internet utility, the future of mobile communication? Or are you buying a long-term bet on the fusion of artificial intelligence and space? The answer, it seems, is all of the above. And that right there is what makes this the most fascinating investment opportunity of our time.